Hey everyone, welcome to The Flip Side with your hosts Chris and Sean.
We're a podcast rambling about the interesting questions in the world of movement. Welcome back to The Flip Side. Today we're going to be talking about how to score tricking in tricking battles. And we're going to be doing a couple episodes about this, but basically today is all about looking at how gymnastics is scored and then how that relates to tricking and if we can figure out a way to properly judge tricking. So we've got Sean here. He is a gymnastics coach, and he coaches like women's, and so he knows, and he also competed men's, so he knows how the judging works, and he has a really good grasp of how the point values work and the connection skills, and way more understanding than I do. So hopefully we can get that to translate into tricking.
Yeah, because gymnastics is surprisingly intricate with certain things, and there's some crazy stuff. But yeah, hopefully we can start to figure out a point system and figure out how to judge tricking, because I feel like that would be really cool to see that in the Olympics one day.
Yeah, so one thing that I think is really interesting, I think it would be a cool place to start, is we were talking about how the judges have shorthand for writing down skills that are being used. That's really interesting. I don't know. I haven't talked to tricking judges, but I should do that before we maybe get into our next episode. But they're using shorthand to record what the gymnasts are doing. So they see a skill, they draw like a little picture or like a little like a small word that but so they can just see every single one, and they don't have to write like a sentence every time they see a skill, or write triple full twist and then be like, oh, but he connected it to two more skills and I didn't see him because I was writing this long word. So that's a really cool way to do it. I think in tricking, it would be, even in gymnastics, I think it would be really cool if we could record it and then play it back and not in slow motion, and then see what we would score it then, instead of having to remember it. And especially when it comes to gymnastics, how tight they are and how meticulous they are. It's like you wrote triple full, but was it clean compared to the other guy? How relevant is that kind of stuff?
I mean, it's pretty relevant, but getting into recording and then viewing the tape later can get into some kind of gray area, because a judge could watch it once and maybe also miss a deduction that they might not have noticed, and then they watch it again, they notice a deduction. So it could be potentially a gray area in my mind of, oh, they could take that deduction after they've already finished their routine, just because they might have missed something if they watch back on a tape. Where I know some places usually record routines in case something does get missed, because there will be times naturally where someone just might look down for that split second and miss something. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen. And at that point, I would agree that you should also have a tape of it just in case, so you can say, I know they did this, and I didn't see that they got credit for this, but here it is.
Yeah, I mean, but the reason so it comes up is because in tricking battles, what happens is, in my head, I'm judging about really fast, right? And Ethan Turner's going, and he does cart dub, punch backside 12, vanish 9, vanish side swipe, cart dub, swing dub. In my head, I was like, dang, he just did a dub dub through to a dub dub, and he used a vanish and from the 9 to the side swipe into his cart, which is difficult connection. There was no hook, no reset. It was just consistent travel of power. Now I go back and watch it, and I'm like, holy shit, that was a cart dub to a vert dub kick, performed really well, no stutter, and then maybe he stuttered from sideswipe to cart. Maybe that was his reset. So now I'm like, okay, well, now there was this area where, no, there wasn't a hook, but his sideswipe is a hook for him. The way he basically did his sideswipe, didn't transfer momentum, but just did standing cart dub dub. Still impressive, but that would be a lack of points, because maybe the other guy, what if the other guy did the exact same combo or an extremely similar combo, and he didn't do the vert dub round? Maybe he didn't do that backside 12, or maybe he didn't stutter from the side swipe, or maybe he did the hook, but it was less of a stutter than the side swipe, or maybe he added a GMS. Things like that, where it's in my head, I wouldn't notice a GMS in there. Like I'm like, because he did the dub dub through to dub dub in my head. I'm like, wait, but there was this intricate stuff in the middle that wasn't the wow moment. So then I didn't remember it. So
Yeah.
like, I guess it's not as much like that in gymnastics because it's like, it's like it leads up to the trick and then you're like ready for the trick. And then you're like, it just keeps doing that. And there's not
Yeah.
as much back and forth. So it's a little less confusing in that aspect. But so
Yeah, I agree.
you think no recording still in gymnastics. You think if they miss the deduction, they miss it because they didn't see it and it was so small that it shouldn't be relevant. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. Mostly.
Okay.
Sorry, it's hard to like explain. So I mean, yeah, if they miss a deduction, I mean they just didn't see it. Because I mean some of those skills are going so fast, it's hard to pick out everything. But I kind of agree with
like,
the court.
What's an example? What's an example of a deduction that would be missed, but you think it's so small that like if they missed it, then it shouldn't be countable?
So far, I mean, sometimes that could even just be like a toe point in certain skills. Because sometimes, I mean, not pointing your toes can be worth up to a 10th off on a skill.
Dang.
And sometimes, I mean, especially at high level, a 10th matters a lot. And even at JO, when you're doing lower level stuff, a 10th is huge. Half a 10th is huge. I've seen first, second, and third have a half a 10th between first to third in a difference of their score, where it went like 9.75 as first, 9.725 as seconds, and then 9.7 as third. Like it makes that much of a difference. Just a slight little toe point or slightly legs apart. Like those tiny little things matter. But I mean, if you miss it, you miss it. And that's just what it is. Like you kind of hope the judge doesn't see every single deduction, but they really train hard to see as much as they can and catch everything.
Yeah. Okay. So, what about like skill values? So we were just talking about how Simone Biles has that skill that's worth literally an entire point.
Yeah.
And then there's like, but most high level skills are worth like half a point each when there's a good connection, right?
Yeah. So the way skills work in gymnastics, they have in fig coding, sorry, not coding. They have from A to J on floor. And I think most other events have up to H, I believe, which is still ridiculous because an H is still worth 8/10, where an A is worth 1. So if you're doing most higher level skills, that's usually around somewhere between D to E or F. So that's a 4/10 skill which at D, a 5/10 skill at E, and a 6/10 skill at F. And those are still really hard, high-level skills. Now, the thing is with Simone, her triple-double on floor of the Biles 2 is a J. So that's literally a whole point compared to them have to do 2 E skills to make up that point. So that's the crazy thing. Or doing a connection skill from, let's say, a D to an E, where they get 2/10 bonus because they're 2 high-level skills connected, and then it would be worth more, but you still have to do 2 skills to get above that 1 skill, and that's just nuts.
Right. That's almost like doing like a dub or like a quad cork. Like it's like, or like maybe a quad full. But yeah. like something like in tricking where it's like, yeah, okay, I could see that. Like in a battle, if someone does a dub and I get quadded on, I feel like I would lose. But like then there's that, you get the connection bonus. Was it dub punch dub or was it dub swing dub? Like, or was it tack dub? Like then now you're doing stuff that's like the connection bonus should count. So I get that. That makes
because
a lot of sense.
Yeah, because the connection bonuses, there are certain values you have to be able to do. It's usually A to like an E or a B to a D. It just depends on how high of level the initial skill is and then how low the secondary skill can be. So if you do like a D skill, a D level skill.
Can you give examples of tricks?
Oh, sorry.
They would be
yes.
Yeah.
So let's say you do a back full, or not a back full. Let's say you go whip back, punch, double back. So that's an A to a C. You wouldn't get, or that might be an A to a D in women's. I'm not exactly sure. I need to look that up. But you don't get connection bonus for that because it's not a high enough level connection. Now, if you can go double Arabian tucked to a punch front, that's an E to an A or a D to an A. That is worth an extra 10th because you did a very high level skill, even though it's connected to a much easier skill. It's the fact that it takes the amount of intricacy to know when to land and how to punch correctly out of a double flipping skill going into that next skill. So then you get a connection bonus of 1/10. Now, there's some cases where you can do a D level skill. Like, let's say you do double Arabian tucked, and then you punch into a front Rudy. So a front 1.5.
Yeah.
That would be a D to a D, and I'm pretty sure that's worth 2/10 for a connection because that's 2 high-level skills that you're doing back-to-back. I mean, that's already hard enough, where I've seen in men's where there's a guy that goes round off back handspring, laid out triple, or laid out 3.5, going backwards, connected to a front double full. So that's an E, E to a D. I mean, that's really hard. And then now he's also throwing a double front after it. All right, so now that's an E to a D to a D. So you get 2 separate connection bonuses, which is already crazy.
Yeah, that's insane. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, so in tricking, that would be like doing G-switch triple cork. And it's like, okay, you might get like a difficulty bonus, like if we're scoring tricking, but versus like doing master scoot triple cork. But then but like if you did any setup into triple cork swing gainer, that's like, whoa, that's a high level skill to a low level skill, but like you did something out of it, you know? Okay, so yeah. That makes sense. Versus like, you know, doing trip dub, which is what kind of what you just talked about with that last guy is what I was thinking of.
It's nuts because like even on bars, like I know most triggers probably won't understand what bars might be, but I mean, there are skills that they do where they do how do I explain this? Sorry. A pike stalder with a half turn. So a stalder is you're coming up from a handstand, you straddle through and don't touch your feet. If you're doing a regular stalder, a pike stalder, your feet go in between your hands. You come all the way around the bar, then you shoot up to handstand, and then you do a 180 on top of the bar while you're still on your hands, and then you swing forward and do a front tuck recatch. So that's called a pike stalder with a half into a pike Jaeger. So that's a D level skill to an E. That's worth an extra 10th, which is crazy.
Yeah, but it's like yeah. Okay. That makes sense. It makes sense because what we were saying before, there are like true bonus points. Like, so in gymnastics, you have your actual score that you're like, these are the skills I'm going to be doing. It adds up to this, but the connections are not counted. So when you do those connections, it's a bonus point. So you could actually score higher than your score, right?
Yeah. So your score is made up of your execution score, which starts at a 10 and counts down by each fault you make, whether it be small or big. And then you have your difficulty score, which is made up of all of the skills that you are doing combined into that one difficulty score. But the amount of skills that you get counted is a max of 10 and a minimum of 7. So you take your highest level skill and then you count all of those scores together to get your difficulty score. And then your connection is completely separate. So the execution plus the difficulty equals your start value. That is what your routine starts at, and that can be technically the highest score you can get before connection bonuses. Then if, let's say, you do a perfect routine and you do those connections, that means you're going to go above and beyond what that was. And that is, it's really crazy to think about.
Does that happen? Does that ever happen?
I've never seen a person get a perfect routine in Fig, personally. which would be mind blowing if they did.
Yeah.
But like girls in JO, because they has a 10-0 start value, and that's the highest it can go. But they can get those connection bonuses to start above 10 then technically, and they can get above 10 if they get a perfect score, because those connection values will push it above that 10.
Got it. So if you're competing like not in the Olympics, is it like a thing where they will dumb down their skills and play at like a lower level in order to like get a higher score than like, can they like play the system like that, or they have to be at like, they're not allowed to dumb their skills down because they're at the level they're at, or can they still do that?
They can still. So actually, funny enough, in a way, college is like that. So for many JO gymnasts, going to college is still really difficult. Even going from level 10 to college, like it's still that really high level playing field. But some Olympians, they can now technically take a step back from how hard of a routine they do and just focus on the skills that they like to do or that are easier for them, and just be able to do it in a routine and get really high skill and really high points. Like Madison Kosian, Kyla Ross, Maggie Nichols, they were all world team members, ex-Olympians, and they went to college and they did extremely well in college, and they weren't doing routines that were quite as hard as they were having to do when they were competing internationally.
But they were still
scoring that high. Like there were times where they were getting perfect 10s in that scoring crazy code.
That's like when Aiden Kennedy battled Shosei. He was doing skills so clean and so perfect, and he knew his battle routines. He knew what skills he was doing and wanted to do, and he didn't mess them up. And then Shosei was like, yeah, but I can quad like every time and do double flips like crazy. But he was not like, you have to see Aiden Kennedy's kicks to understand really what I mean. It's like, yeah, Shosei can kick, but like Aiden Kennedy can kick. so it's like that. Like he's maybe doing dumbed down skills compared to Shosei, but the skills that he's doing might give him that, execution and value that almost makes him even. That makes it really hard to score. So in gymnastics, there's not really like any discrepancy. Like everyone's pretty much okay with, like, they're not like if there was a bystander or like a coach and they're like, they watched the routines and they're like, oh my gosh, my girl did way better, like way stronger skills, and she lost because of small deductions. Is that like something that happens? Is that something people are not happy with?
It does happen. I mean, you're usually not going to be happy always when your girl or your guy or whoever you are coaching is doing those super hard skills and they're losing. But at the same time, you have to understand that deductions come along with small faults, and you just have to learn to be okay with it and learn how to do the skill better and learn how to get those repetitions in so you can just do it more cleanly, so then you might not lose the next time. But I mean, the way that routines are built, you can kind of quote unquote cheat the system by doing some of those lower level skills, quote unquote lower level. Some of them are still really hard routines, and I wouldn't even say that they're low level, but you can kind of do slightly lower value skills and still get those high scores because they follow all the requirements that are needed to make the routine. And that's the way they kind of play the field.
Okay, that makes sense. It's also different though. So like, what if gymnastics didn't have to stick their skills? Like, so in tricking, you don't have to stick your skills, and I guess we've been talking about like a scoring system for tricking, and it's like we've been talking about like the number of moves in your combo. We've talking about the cleanliness in your combo, the connections, like the connection of difficult skills, and your ending power move, and that you should end with a power move and not a small skill unless it's like, like triple cork gainer or something like that. Like you shouldn't end with like, triple cork, pop flash, backside 9, hook, cheat 7. Like that's super weak. Like, yeah, it had a triple cork, but like you should have put that at the end, because otherwise, like you said, it's like doing like back handspring, double back, punch Arabian step out round off. Be like, okay, what?
And everybody would look at
you,
it like, what is that?
Did you just mess up? Like, did you? That's what. So that's the first thought, is that you made a mistake, instead of, because no one wants to end with that. No one wants to end their sentence like with half a word. They want to finish their word, put an exclamation mark at the end. So yeah, so like if tricking didn't have to stick their skills, or I mean, if gymnastics did not have to stick, yeah, if they didn't have to stick their skills, do you think how would the scoring work? Because now you're dealing with, you're still dealing with difficulty and execution, but I feel like now, like, the deductions are like not necessarily going to be there anymore.
Yeah. Oh man, that would really change the game. So to clarify, I think you're saying as long as we can land feet first and not fall over or step out of bounds or something, you're good. Correct?
You can step out of bounds. That's fine.
Okay.
Like if you land
really
a quad, if you land a quad backflip and then trip backwards and fall into the crowd, but you didn't fall over and the crowd caught you, it still counts. Because it looks like you were still going to land if the crowd wasn't there.
Oh,
that's tricky.
So slight differences between JO and Fig again. There are deductions for taking steps. JO is 1/10, 2/10, 3/10. A fall is 5/10. So a small step is 1, a medium step is 2, a large step is 3. Falling over is a fall, and that's considered.
How do they judge that? How do they judge medium?
How far your feet move compared to your body height? How far your feet move, or how far you go backwards, essentially.
And they don't have it on recorded.
No.
Okay.
And Fig is even harder. It goes 1/10, 3/10, 5/10 for your steps, and then a point for falling.
Oh, so
a whole point for falling.
So in JO, it was if you fall, it's half a point. You can still come back from that.
You can. It's just a lot harder because if you're not clean, then it's like, let's say you do a back hip circle, super easy skill on bars. It's literally you cast up off the bar, so you kick your feet up off the bar, and then you spin around the bar. All right, just a simple explanation. And if you fall off in the middle of that skill, you're probably going to get deductions for technique and form plus the fall. So it's not just the fall that you're losing points on. It's also the technique and the form that probably went along with it.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like, if you're falling, you're probably screwing up in other places too.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
totally.
In theory, if we didn't have deductions for taking those steps or falling in a way, well, stepping out of bounds and taking steps, that just like completely changes the game. Because they could literally do, like, let's say Simone Biles does a triple-double again, and she doesn't just stick it or take a small step. So a small step is only a 10th. Whoop-de-doo. But let's say she literally rebounds up and takes 3 steps backwards and goes out of bounds and doesn't get deductions for it. That would be people would just be able to throw super big skills as long as they can just stay on. That is so that would change the game dramatically, because the reason that they take those deductions for taking steps and rebounding incorrectly, or rebounding when you're not supposed to and not connecting it to a skill, or stepping out of bounds, is because that means you're not showing control of the skill.
Yeah.
That's what it's there for. So if they didn't have that, potentially I would think people would throw skills that they shouldn't be doing because they might not have the full control to do the skill. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I think that it. Okay, so I guess I pushed it too far. In tricking, like, say, just in simple terms, someone does a TDR double cork and they clutch it out and they land it and they're bumped. The next guy does TDR double cork and just falls like a foot stomped stuck. Okay, yeah. We know who won that battle. Like, but it's not that relevant that he didn't. Like, if the other guy did hook TDR dub and had the exact same landing, like, they'd be pretty much even. If he did cheat 9 hook sideswipe TDR dub and had the exact same landing, then it's fine. Even if he had a little bit better landing, then it's like he won just because he comboed it. Like then the landing becomes irrelevant because he's beat him by something else, obviously.
Yeah.
But then we get into a situation where what if that guy did TDR dub, fell a foot, stomped it, stuck it, and the other guy did the combo into it and clutched it out? Now I don't know who wins anymore.
Yeah, because if you clutch it out where you're landing the skill, but you're starting to fall, like if you land somewhat off axis and you start to fall forward or you're falling backwards and you catch yourself, I can see that in tricking as kind of being that extra level of like, oh, dude, like nice catch. But
right, it's like the crowd loves that. So now that I'm thinking about it, like I feel like he would win that round because he comboed it. He was pushing his limit to beat the other guy at something he did, and he successfully did it regardless of how he landed. Now that guy has to take responsibility and respond to it. You know, that's where it becomes difficult because in gymnastics, it's like the reason that that sticking matters is because you're not responding versus you're just doing your routine and you're judged on your routine alone, then compared afterwards. Versus in the tricking battle, you're consistently compared over and over again. So that's why I think the stutters just don't matter as much. Yeah,
and that's the one thing that I think is kind of nice about tricking is like if you can really consistently just push your limit even during when you're battling, it's gonna have more of an effect than in gymnastics. Like you can push your limits in gymnastics, but if you're not doing it cleanly, it's just going to come back to bite you in the ass real fast. But tricking, like you clutch something and it's something that you've potentially only done like a few times and you clutch that landing and you make it, people are going to notice and be like, dude, that was sick.
Right.
Like that is kind of the weird thing between gymnastics and tricking that is kind of that gray area. I mean, if gymnastics could do that, it'd be really nice. But yeah,
they can't.
Doesn't let me think that way.
Right, yeah, that makes sense because you know you're competing for cleanliness and you're competing for consistency versus. But I think there are trickers who do trick like that in battles and even trick like that even at the sessions. So they're not necessarily going to. They're not trying to push their limit every single time, or at least not in that same way. They're trying to do it in a different aspect, which is, I think, more similar to gymnastics, which isn't wrong. It's just, I think, different than the tricking battle culture has been like brought up. Okay, and so what about, this is really interesting, team battles. Should team battles have, so like say it's a 3v3, should they have an individual winner and a team winner? And how do you score that? I mean, do you have to have each person's name and then shorthand every single skill they're doing? Because there's people doing skills in the corners and in the center all at the same time.
Oh, God.
So then it's like, is it performance based? Is it just what you noticed? Should it be recorded and then broken down afterwards? I don't know. Because in gymnastics, you're saying it's not recorded, and it's how long does it take them to put the scores together afterwards? Is it difficult because of the equation only, or is it difficult because they're collaborating?
So judging, they'll usually watch the routine. So let's say your routine's about a minute, 20 seconds, give or take. And after that, then they look back at the skills, see if there was any connection bonuses, see what the deductions were, add up what the value of the routine was for the difficulty, then figure out the execution, add that together, add the connection bonus, and then they get the score. So that sometimes can take a minute, 2 minutes, give or take. So, I mean, team scores happen at the very end of the competition, where in tricking, that would be a little bit harder because if you have people doing stuff, like let's say you have 3 people on the floor for a quote unquote a team battle, and they're each doing separate things at separate places on the floor, it's gonna be almost impossible to watch everything at the same time and notice everything. So if you don't have multiple judges, like higher level gymnastics, you have 2 judges per event or more sometimes.
Okay, so in tricking, there's usually 3. Sometimes they do 4 or 5. Obviously, the odd number is better.
So that's the thing, though. If let's say you have a team battle in tricking, and you have 3 people on the floor for that team doing stuff.
Yeah, 3v3. Okay.
Have one judge per person watching separate people and figuring out what they're doing, because they can't pay attention to 3 people at the same time. That is impossible.
See, that's really interesting. See, that's not how I would go about it, but that's exactly how gymnastics would go about it. So that's really cool. See, like, that's why we need to compare it to a bunch of other sports too, because that's exactly what gymnastics would do. They would have one judge on each person, and they would judge that person based on their execution, their routine, and potentially their their comeback ability, like their responses to the opponent, but not necessarily be judging the opponent, just be judging, maybe the comparison between the tricks that they did, like, oh, he did a jackknife through to snapu. Like, okay, so like, I'll just make sure to make a note of that. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, because like, I mean, if for example, like if in your team battle, like let's say one team, the 3 people did something completely individual, and then the next team that came up that's going against them synced something. Now the judges can watch every person and notice what's going on. So, but that could also be seen as way, in some aspects, harder to go at the same time as someone else and to really sync something. So they could look at that as, oh, that's harder to do. They might give them a little bit of leeway here or there, or give them extra like cred or points for doing it that way. But I really think that if they could look at each person and then figure out how well each person did, and then add that together, in my head, that would be a way to get their kind of team score, and then how well the next team responds, and then add that together, and then at the end just figure out like who really did better point value in a way. But that would also be hard because you'd also have to look at clutch landings. You need to look at how somewhat clean their skills are, because I mean, if someone does a triple cork and they're like barely landing it, not just like a clutch landing, I mean like barely landing it, and it's kind of ugly, and the next guy that responds does a extremely clean triple cork,
just spin step
combo and just stops it,
spin step like, pause, TDR trip,
just because.
Right. Okay, so I actually really, really like that, because the thing that happens is like sometimes it's like Michael Guthrie and like 2 double corkers versus like 3 double corkers, maybe double cork variationers, and everyone has like decent kicks, but it's like it's Mike and 2 weaker guys versus 3 slightly above average guys. So it's like, okay, Mike's gonna win. And you watch the battle, you're like, wow, Mike carried the team, destroyed everyone. If it was 1v5, Mike would have won. So that's how people think of that.
Michael is a team by himself.
Right. And it shouldn't be like that, because it's a team battle. So then we can have that like, oh, like Mike wins gold for this battle, but that team won gold for this battle. And
yeah, and I agree on that point. Gymnastics does that. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But
no, that's exactly what I was getting to.
Yeah, the gymnastics aspect, technically you're competing for yourself and your team. So the way gymnastics works is you're competing for your own all-around score. But in the team aspect, it's the 3 highest scores that count towards the team. So like, let's say like a tricking battle, let's say you had 5 people. And the 4 people with Guthrie were just average, and the other 5 were like a little bit above average. So that team probably did a lot better with the 5 people above average, but Michael did better than everybody else. So overall, Michael wins the individual medal in a way, and then the other team is just a better team, and they can win that team aspect. And that's the way they do it in gymnastics too, is the same exact thought process. And I actually would think that would hopefully be able to translate decently, and people wouldn't get too mad at judges in tricking, but that happens in gymnastics too. People get mad.
No, I think that is definitely the way. Like, I'm sold on doing tricking battles that way. But then I think that 1v1s should be judged completely differently. Completely differently. We will go more in depth. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to the comparisons here?
No, so far, I mean, we've pretty much touched base on most things that we were kind of looking at that I could think of. I mean, the only thing I could think is working on somewhat figuring out difficulty values eventually for things and trying to come up with a system. But I know, who was it that came up with that tricking Bible thing?
Loop kicks.
Yes. Like I would think that is also a pretty good starting point on figuring out how hard different skills are, because someone could think a certain type of skill is hard for them, but it's actually not a difficult skill in general. Like someone could say it's hard for them, but they can do D-leg twist. And
from
a cord is just hard, but it's not an actual difficult skill. So really, why would you want to keep working on it? I mean, granted, you need it to keep leveling up, but you're going to do the more difficult skill in your combo. And then maybe
that's totally true. When I first started battling, maybe you guys know Joe Moline, we trained together. We went to Trick Different, and we were there, no, I think this was at Trick Different. Maybe it was at Neo, the showdown, but I think this one was at Trick Different, and we were battling, not me and him, but he was like kind of coaching me, and he's like, I was like, dude, what if they like cart dub on me? Should I cart dub, or like should I just do a double core combo? Like, what should I do? And he goes, dude, you suck at cart dub. Do not do a cart dub. And I was like, well, like I can do it. And he goes, yeah, but that's not the point. Like cart dub is so easy, and double cork is much harder. And I was like, yeah, not for me. And he goes, the judges don't know that. So don't do a skill that's difficult for you and expect that people are going to be excited for you. You need to do a skill that is easy for you and difficult for everyone else. And I was like, whoa, you're right. And it was my first time battling. I mean, it's so obvious, but like, you're like, you're trying to push your limits. And so you think like, I need to do this because he did it and I can do it, even though it's hard for me. No, you should do what you're good at and one up him. But I think we will go next episode. We're going to talk about how breakdancing judges their breakdancers and how they compete and how it's judged. And I think that is a much better way to compare the 1v1s. And I think it's much more in depth, and I think it needs to be much more in depth, more so than the team battle. I think the team battle, I think that is the way to do it. I think it's much easier. So we are going to go into that with the B-Boy next episode.
Yeah. Don't forget to follow our socials at ZidaneCloud on Instagram for me, Sean.
And CHRISPY_TRIX. That's Crispy Tricks on Instagram. And I also have another YouTube channel, Tricks Fix, TRIX FIX, for more tutorials and other things.
And we'll see you guys next time. Don't forget to follow our socials at ZidaneCloud on Instagram for me, Sean.
And CHRISPY_TRIX. That's Crispy Tricks on Instagram. And I also have another YouTube channel, Tricks Fix, TRIX FIX, for more tutorials and other things.
And we'll see you guys next time.